episode that is celebrated as an early Christmas scene from Dickens. And what people celebrate about Pickwick Papers is the way that Dickens uses serialization so well. Even though the Pickwick Papers is set some years before the time of writing, what Dickens does is he synchronizes the calendar of Pickwick and his friends with when the installments are being published. So this Christmas installment is published on the 1st of January, so that you are reading what Pickwick's been up to in the last 4 weeks that you've been living yourself. The Valentine's episode with Sam Weller is published on 1st of March. So again, you are living through simultaneously with the Pickwickians. And that's something that clearly Dickens is inverting in Edwin Drood. He's not doing Christmas at Christmas time. He's doing it in the height of and disconcerting us as a consequence. If we're talking about Dickens and Christmas, obviously you have to discuss A Christmas Carol. There is a Christmas scene. That's what Christmas should be. There is the fireplace, and on the floor is a banquet, not prostrate, drug-riddled uncles. This is what we expect for Christmas. And again, the Cricket on the Hearth as well, where once again the fireplace is the center of a domestic happy scene. This is what Dickens is turning on its head in Edwin Drood. Now, when we think about Dickens and Christmas, obviously Christmas Carol is the headline, but we have to also acknowledge what comes next. So A Christmas Carol is a huge success. On the back of that, Dickens writes more Christmas books. He writes The Chimes, yay. He writes Cricket on the Hearth, hooray. He writes Battle of Life, okay. And he writes The Haunted Man, hooray. And at the end of that, he then stops writing Christmas books and starts writing Christmas numbers. These are literature collections that come as part of the Household Words and All the Year Round, where he's writing collections of short stories with other collaborators with an overarching narrative. And initially, they have a Christmas theme, a round of stories by the Christmas fire, and then another round of stories by the Christmas fire. But at that point, then Dickens stops and starts doing entirely different frameworks with nothing to connect them to Christmas. The only thing that makes Christmas numbers is that they're published at Christmas, nothing to do with their content. And many have noted that when you look at the tone of the Christmas numbers, they are completely the opposite of festive. They deal with things like murder and loss and death and betrayal and broken hearts. These are not cheerful stories that are being presented in the Christmas numbers. If we jump to the last Christmas number, this is No Thoroughfare, written by Dickens and Collins, only the two of them writing on this one, in 1867. And we can see by this point that the novelty has worn off for Dickens. He writes to Collins to tell him how he's getting on writing his part, and the answer is, not well. I am jogging on at the pace of a wheelbarrow propelled by a Greenwich pensioner. Not very fast. Not very fast at all. The following year, he writes to Wills about the next number, the 1868 number, and he's full of woe at the idea of it. I have been, and still am, which is worse, in a positive state of despair about the Christmas number. I cannot get an idea for it, which is in the least satisfactory to me, and yet I have been steadily trying all this month. I have invented so many of the Christmas numbers, and they are so profoundly unsatisfactory after all, with the introduced stories and their want of cohesion or originality, that I fear I am sick of the thing. I've had serious thoughts of abandoning the Christmas number. And that's exactly what he does. He relaunches All the Year Round new series in September, and when he does, he takes time in there to make a note to say that there will be no Christmas number that year. The extra Christmas number has now been so extensively and regularly and often imitated that it is in very great danger of becoming tiresome. I have therefore resolved, though I cannot add willingly, to abolish it at the highest tide of its success. Now, there's a lot of public positive spin in this statement here. When Dickens says it's in great danger of becoming tiresome, what he really means is it's become tiresome. When he says he can't willingly abolish it, what he means is, oh, I'm so willing to abolish it. Again, remember that private correspondence to Wills. He says, I am sick of the thing. Now, in this, I am reminded of a more recent example of the actor Chadwick Boseman, who has leapt to fame playing the lead character in the Marvel movie Black Panther. And there he is playing the king of a fictional country called Wakanda. And in the film, they have a salute they do where they go, Wakanda forever. Okay. Now, Boseman makes the film. It's a huge success. His fans love it. And they all say to him, do the thing, do the salute. And so he does. And you can see him there, cheerful, loving his life. This will never get old. It gets old. Just 3 months later, at the next premiere, they're saying, do the thing. Wakanda forever. This is Dickens and the Christmas number. Every single year, doing the same thing again, Christmas forever. Now, he may not be talking about Christmas in those numbers, but he does talk about Christmas around this time in Great Expectations in 1861. And Great Expectations, as we all know, starts with Pip encountering the convict Magwitch on the marshes. That's Christmas time. Merry Christmas. And if that wasn't bad enough, even without that tension going on, we are shown that the monotonous routine of Christmas dinner in Pip's house is something that has lost all joy. We're told that Mrs. Joe, having so much to do, was going to church vicariously. That is to say, Joe and I were going. Once again, it's that performance of Christmas. There's no sense of, oh, hurrah, Christ is born, we must go to the church and celebrate. It's, oh, God, I've got to make the dinner, I've got to get things ready. You guys go to church, otherwise the neighbors will talk. And Joe does go, but wearing clothes utterly unsuitable for him. So he looks like the picture of misery in a full suit of Sunday penitentials. And when they come back from church and they have the dinner, Pip and Dickens give this wonderful description of that terrible monotony of the annual family get-together. Uncle Pumblechook turns up with 2 bottles of alcohol, and we're told every Christmas day he presented himself as a profound novelty with exactly the same words, and carrying the 2 bottles like dumbbells. Every Christmas day, Mrs. Joe replied, as she now replied, "Oh, Uncle Pumblechook, this is coming." Every Christmas day, he retorted, as he now retorted, "Oh, it's no more than your merits, and now are you all bobbish, and how 6 of halfpence," meaning me. It's that same routine we all know and fear of, oh, you got me socks. Again, you shouldn't have. There's no cheer here. There's no joy. It's become an ordeal of Christmas. Now, don't forget that at this time when Dickens is in the late 60s and thinking about abandoning the Christmas numbers, he's also, of course, on his reading tour, as I've said already. And the reading tours involve him going around reliving his previous works, a lot of them being Christmas works, Mrs. Lirriper, Dr. Marigold, The Chimes, and, of course, A Christmas Carol. He's going on there religiously, constantly reliving the past here and going through Christmas Forever, on and on again. So, all of this comes to pass in Edwin Drood and It's Christmas again. Now, it's widely recognised that Cloisterham is based on the town of Rochester. So those early reviews likening Edwin Drood to Pickwick are more accurate than they know, because both his first and last novels have Rochester as part of the location. There's a nice symmetry to that, the sort of alpha and omega of his writing career there. Dickens, of course, knew Rochester both as a young man and as an old man. As a young man, his father took him to see Gad's Hill and said, "One day, my boy, if you work hard, you can own that place." Well, now Dickens has worked hard, and he does own the place, and he's back in the place where he grew up as a child. And he's back having been around the world, traveling the UK and the US on these reading tours, getting these rounds of applause every night, and now he's been told you've got to stop for ill health. So he's back home. It's a bit quiet. And what you get as he talks about Cloisterham in Edwin Drood is a sense of coming back home and everything being just not quite the same. So this is easily my favorite passage in the whole of Drood. This is how Dickens opens the discussion of Christmas in Cloisterham. Christmas Eve in Cloisterham. A few strange faces in the streets, a few other faces, half strange and half familiar. Once the faces of Cloisterham children, Now the faces of men and women who come back from the outer world at long intervals to find the city wonderfully shrunken in size, as if it had not washed by any means well in the meanwhile. That's Dickens. To these, the striking of the cathedral clock and the cawing of the rooks from the cathedral tower are like voices of their nursery time. To such as these, it has happened in their dying hours afar off, they've imagined their chamber floor to be strewn with the autumnal leaves fallen from the elm trees in the close. So have the rustling sounds and fresh scents of their earliest impressions revived when the circle of their lives was very nearly traced, and the beginning and the end were drawing close together. Now, there's a lot I like in this passage. That discussion of the sort of the performative nature of Christmas. That here, the people who've grown up in Cloisterham have left it, and now, after long intervals, oh dear, it's Christmas again. We should probably go visit your parents, shouldn't we? Yes, I suppose we should. Back they come to their hometown, and it just seems so much smaller than they remember it. The referencing of autumnal leaves summarizes the tone perfectly, and bearing in mind we're already in Christmas time, in summer, autumn as well, why not, Dick? Just throw in all the seasons there while you're at it. But it's this last passage here about the beginning and the end that takes on a whole other poignance when you're reading it, as Dickens's first readers were, straight after his death, and as we all have been ever since. So we are tempted to look upon this as a reflection on Dickens's own life coming to an end here, the beginning and the end drawing close together. Now, this is the danger, because we are once again using our knowledge of Dickens's death to inform how we read Edwin Drood. This is being read in July 1870, but it's not being written then, obviously. We know Dickens is working about 3 months ahead, so if anything, this is being written around April 1870, the very time when the first installment is being published, and those reviews are coming out likening Drood to Pickwick, of all things, as well. Did Dickens read his own reviews? I don't know, but there's a sense of a consciousness here of nostalgia, of returning to the beginning and restarting again. And this is where I want to kind of think of a counterfactual point here, which is, what if, like Tiny Tim, Dickens did not die, at least not in 1870? What if Edwin Drood had not been his last work? How would we read this differently as a consequence? Now, let's put everything together to think about this. Dickens is the man who invented Christmas. Of course he is. He's celebrated for this and his early works. He has just been going through a phase of revisiting those works through the reading tours, being confronted on a daily basis with his earlier works and trying to work out who he is now in comparison to that. Because the Dickens who wrote Edwin Drood is not the same Dickens who wrote A Christmas Carol. That man was a young man, newly married with a young family at the start of his career. The Dickens writing Drood is an older man with a spectacularly broken marriage and grown-up children who are failing to meet the expectations of an exacting father. So this is a different sort of Christmas we're seeing here now in Drood, obviously, because there's a different kind of Dickens who is writing about it. But equally, if we think back to the shift from Dickens's early comic works to those later social satires, that comes around from his time in Italy. Forster calls that time in Italy in 44 and 45 a turning point in Dickens's career, because he takes a year's break away from writing and then comes back re-energized to restart his writing career again. They'll never get another Pickwick from me now, he said. Well, Dickens has had an even longer break. He's had a 5-year break now between Our Mutual Friend and Edwin Drood. So I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that he will be going through a similar process of reassessing who he is as a writer as he now returns to writing novels again. And the reading tours encourage the idea of going back and revisiting this. This does not need to be seen as an attack on his earlier works, but rather a reappraisal of moving forward into a new phase. So that this is not Dickens's last book, but the latest book, the newest book in a new third phase of Dickens's fiction that never came to be. So in Edwin Drood, he's not attacking Christmas, he's using it to reinvent himself as a writer, to reestablish our expectations of him, and to push us into a new territory for where he might be going as well. So in Edwin Drood, I would argue that Dickens is the man who reinvented Christmas. Thank you very much. That's me finished.